I'd like to now introduce Michael Preston from Trimble. So Mike, take it away.
Thanks, Anthony. I appreciate hearing your discussion there about what you're doing with LiveAO. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the technology, and I'm going to share my slides here, and we'll talk a little bit about what we're doing as far as technology and moving things forward. Okay, I'm Michael Preston. I'm the Director of Enterprise Asset Management Energy for Trimble. And I want to talk a bit about Trimble, and then I want to talk about the technology that we're using to incorporate and look at vegetation management and right of way, and then dealing with fire mitigation. So a little bit about Trimble. We're a very innovative and market leading company. One of the things I wanted to point out here specifically about Trimble is what we're doing as far as the innovation side. We have about 3.7 billion in revenue, and of that, we take 14% of that is actually goes back into R&D. The other things that we do is we do a lot of stuff with construction, utilities, and transportation. And then the other big thing is we look at the ESG and how we're looking at greenhouse gas emissions. We talk about climate change, things like that, and how we're affecting the overall globe, and how Trimble can make it better across the globe. So this is just a little bit of a view of some of the utilities we work with across the United States. We also work with a number of utilities across the globe, and we work with about 144 utilities in different capacities doing different things. So what I want to talk a little bit about is what we're doing for vegetation management, which is a very asset management type driven piece. And we look at everything within the vegetation management side as an asset, whether it's your power lines, whether it's your trees that are close to the vegetation, and how do we deal with all the vegetation information. So within Trimble, we take this and look at it as an asset management side within very Esri-centric or GIS-centric things. So we have put these tools together to really start looking at the vegetation issues you're dealing with, the right-of-way issues you're dealing with, and then looking at the different hazards that are part of the GIS and the forestry and the vegetation parts. As we look at what we're doing within vegetation, we're actually bringing in LiDAR, satellite information, a number of different things as far as technology drivers to see what's going on within the vegetation areas and how we can combat and look at really where you need to cut, where you don't need to cut. So if we look at the use of LiDAR, we're really looking at how we are classifying the LiDAR data to isolate the areas of risk. So if you look at this particular photo here, we're looking at the transmission or distribution lines and how that LiDAR information is being classified and being brought into the system. Within this, we can actually start looking at the different areas that need to be cut according to the how close it is to the line, how much is encroachment, and where are the color code risks and how they're dealing with the fire risk within the model. We're also looking at the different impacts this might have as when you're cutting back and looking at the system. Within this area, when we're using LiDAR, we're also starting to look at areas that need to be cut and really getting away from a cycle-based cutting, but really looking and focusing on areas that need to be cut right now instead of looking at this area or that area that's within the cycle. We are also looking at multiple years of LiDAR. So how does 1 year to the next year look as far as your LiDAR in areas of encroachment and how you're dealing with that? If you're looking at multiple years of LiDAR and you can bring this within your system as an asset, you can now start looking at the different areas, evaluate what's good, what's bad, and then start looking at where you've cut in the past and how is that being affected. And this is really this historical information that I think is very important as a technology when you're driving to look at what's going on within your vegetation and how you're cutting that information back. So as we look at, there's other areas of information we bring in. Not only do we bring in the LiDAR information, but we're also looking at what we're doing within satellite and how we're bringing in the satellite information and what is the fire risk there. So by using a combination of both LiDAR that might be flown every 2 years, and then in between those years using satellite, we're actually looking at 2 different pieces of information and doing some analysis on what the risk would be within the two. So now you're getting a really good view of not only what you're pulling up from the satellite side, but what else are you pulling up from the LiDAR side? And then what is the changes that are happening? How are you looking at different targets to inspect? Could be things that you're pulling up and looking at the history as far as what was your beetle infestation, how did that affect what's going on with vegetation? So we're really driving this to the asset, looking at how the affects your system, and then looking at the combination of both satellite and LiDAR and doing the analysis on the fire risk. We get a lot of our satellite information, and we're working with our customers from Live Video, who's a very good partner of ours. And we're really taking a lot of their information that they're integrating and putting into our system and really doing the analysis. Analysis is definitely key here, and looking at the different areas that you've cut in the past, how it's affected now, and how you might look at what you're doing in the future. And we're really hearing from a lot of our customers where they're starting to look at not just doing whole swaths of cutting along the right-of-ways and stuff, but really looking at what needs to be cut more than just doing a whole swath down the line. So, other things as far as mitigation of fire risk, it's driven by the LiDAR and satellite. Like I said before, we're really looking at how we're dispatching crews, how the crews on the ground are being used to look at the mobile pieces within the vegetation. And we're really doing the analysis on the front end and the back end of the system, looking at where there's high overstrikes, where there's a lot of encroachment, what's been the past, what's been the future of things going on, and really trying to identify areas not only in your cycle, but also right away where there's issues and where you need to cut back on those issues. So as we start to audit and complete the work and monitor the sites for compliance, we're really looking at different things and how that's being evaluated in the field. So as we start to talk about technology, we really, as far as the asset side, the GIS side, that's all very important as far as the technology and how that's driving what's going on within the vegetation world as far as cutbacks and fire mitigation, but also being able to take other pieces of technology and get that into the people's hands in the field, the boots on the ground, and being able to get them to visualize what's going on in the field. So we use a piece of technology which is developed by Trimble called Sight Vision. And with this, that actually gives you the AR visualization to start really looking at areas of problem, and then looking at your distribution lines, your transmission lines, and then looking at the areas that the vegetation analysis has come back and said, I need to be cutting those areas out. So if we look at this particular picture here, we're actually looking at the problem areas within this transmission line for vegetation cutbacks. So the triangles would be areas that need to be cut back. And then these are when you go down and you're within your system on your mobile phone and maybe tied to GPS, you're able to start visualizing areas that I need to cut. Instead of, and sometimes you're just looking this through your mobile application, you're guessing, you might be guessing a little bit, you might be estimating this area needs to be cut, that might not need to be cut. With this, you can, through the AR side, really directly see what's going on. All this information is directly being enterprised and brought in through the Esri side. And then we deploy that information through our vegetation management application to start looking at these possible cutbacks. So now we're using the technology of AR in the field to visualize what needs to be done, looking at digital twins, and then completing the field information and getting things cut back in a timely manner. So here's another view of another way we're looking at fire mitigation. Here we're bringing in raw LiDAR information right into the system. We're actually looking at the points that the red points are areas that need to be cut back right away, and the yellow are areas that might be of less concern. But really taking this AR and visualizing that information, where here we're looking at the direct LiDAR points coming in play, where before we are looking at the Esri generated vegetation encroachments that were brought back through triangles. Either way, we're able to bring into the AR and start visualizing and identifying areas that might be areas of problem, reduce right of way things, and then looking at simulating sags and sway, and reducing fines and legal costs, which all incorporate into what's going on within vegetation. So here's another simulation of fire mitigation or fire risk. Here we're actually on the top left using AR technology to visualize a transmission line and all the sag and sway, which would go on within the different heating conditions of that transmission line to start looking at vegetation issues. Here you would see some of these trees should be cut back or they should be actually taken out. And then at the bottom right, as we were all talking about hazardous trees, hazardous mitigation, we've actually created within the AR a tool set where it allows you to create a dome around the bottom of the tree and the top of the tree, and then start to visualize that falling ratio from when the tree falls from either left to right. And that actually gives you a different way to look at the hazardous trees in the field. And you can start to identify different trees with that dome with the AR technology.